Everybody out with us this morning. And if you have your Bibles with you, our text is going to be from Matthew chapter 25. It's a long reading, but our text contains one of the many parables of the Lord. A parable is a story from everyday life used to illustrate a moral or religious truth. It is the primary method Jesus used to teach about the kingdom of God. Naturally, in a largely agricultural environment, many of Jesus' parables involve such things as sowing seed, planting a field, making bread, weeding a field, planting a vineyard, building barns, or observing a fig tree. The lessons from this parable include talents are given according to one's ability. Talents may be used or forfeited. There are no zero-talented servants. Reward depends upon the use of the talent given. Failure to use a talent evoked the wrath of the servant's Lord. And so in this lesson, we will focus on the reason given by the one-talent servant for not using the talent. And that was, I was afraid. Matthew 25 and beginning in verse 14. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also who had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you know that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. fear is a great obstacle in serving the Lord. Notice some examples of those who were influenced by fear. We go back to the book of Numbers, and in chapter 13, we look at the story of the spies that were sent into Canaan. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send me to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am given to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a chief among them." And so they sent out these spies, and Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said to them, "Go up into the Negev, and go up into the hill country, and see what the land is, and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are trees in it or not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time of the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up, they spied out the land, and they came back after 40 days. Pardon me. They came to Moses and Aaron, and to all the congregation of the people of Israel, and they brought back word to them, to all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan." But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." So they brought back a not very good report, and they were afraid of these people. These spies were, but Joshua and Caleb had a different report. In chapter 14 and verse 9, it says, "Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they are bread for us. Their protection is removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them." And so these spies were afraid. But Joshua and Caleb said, "No, we can overtake them because the Lord is with us." And then in Judges chapter 7, we have another instance of obstacles in serving the Lord, and that is the 22,000 of Gideon's army. In Judges 7, and beginning in verse 3, it says, "Now therefore proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, Whoever is fearful and trembling, let him return home and hurry away from Mount Gilead." Then 22,000 of the people returned, and 10,000 remained. And the Lord said to Gideon, "The people ate or the people are still too many. Pardon me. Take them down to the water, and I will test them. And so they were put to the test as to how they drank the water, whether they bent over or they lapped it up like a dog. And so they were afraid, these 22,000 of Gideon's army, but the Lord took care of them, and he said that he would watch after them, and he did. In John chapter 12, we find in verses 42 and 43 that the chief rulers were afraid. It says, nevertheless, many even of the authorities believed in him, talking about Jesus, but for fear of the Pharisees they did not confess it, so that they would not be put out of the synagogue. For they love the glory that comes from man more than the glory that comes from God. So the chief rulers were afraid that they were going to be put out of the synagogue. Then there was Joseph of Arimathea. In John 19 and in verse 38, after Jesus had been crucified and he was buried, and Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate he might take away the body of Jesus, and Pilate gave him permission. So he came and took away his body. So Joseph of Arimathea was afraid of the Jews, that they would do something to him because he was a disciple of Jesus. And then we find in Matthew 14 that Peter was afraid. And in verse 22, beginning, it says, immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When the evening came, he was there alone, but the boat by this time was a long way from the land, beaten by the waves, for the wind was against them. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, "It is a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." And Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Just as fear robbed these of precious blessings, it robs many today of progress and blessings. Some churches are afraid to take reasonable risks to advance the Lord's cause. They are afraid to appoint elders. They are afraid to practice discipline. They are afraid to earnestly contend for the faith. Some individuals are afraid. They are afraid to obey the gospel. They are afraid to lead prayer or teach a class or lead singing and so on. Obviously, everyone is not cut out for these tasks, but many are doing them today who were scared stiff the first time they tried. Fear is tragic because of what it produces in a servant of God. This can be seen in the Lord's reply to the servant in Matthew 25 and verse 26, where he said, "You wicked and slothful servant." Wickedness and that fear causes one to disobey the Lord. Slothfulness or laziness in that fear causes inactivity. Unprofitable, he is useless to his Lord. There was the destiny of that man who was, as Jesus called him, worthless, a worthless servant. And he said to cast him into outer darkness. Cast this unprofitable servant into outer darkness and into the lake of fire and the second death. May we say that with the Hebrew writer, "The Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" So can we say that we are fearful? Are we afraid of what might happen? Do we have the ability to do things, but yet we sit back and do not do them? Are you afraid? If you are afraid, then you need to take heart of what Jesus has said. We've got to be careful with our lives. We've got to listen to what he has to say, because we know that the Lord will take care of us. He will watch over us. He will help us in times of need. If maybe you are afraid of something, then you need to pray to God about it. I know people who are afraid to die. But you know, dying is just part of life. There's no way that anyone can get by that. And so we have to be ready for when we die. So why be afraid? If we are a Christian, we know that God will save us if we are obedient to him. But if we don't do what we're supposed to do, like the one talent man who did not put his money to the investors, then we're not going to gain heaven as our eternal home. If you're here this morning and you are afraid of dying, if you are afraid of missing heaven for eternity, you have the opportunity to pray to God. We'll be happy to pray with you or pray for you, whatever the case may be. If we can help you, we encourage you to make things right before the time comes, so that when we do die, then we will be able to live with God in heaven. Whatever the case may be, let us know if we can help you, as together we sing the invitation song.